So we're here outside Downing Street once again in Whitehall. Today I just want to tell the interesting little story of where Downing Street gets its name from. He's an often overlooked character in history, but he's an interesting little footnote nonetheless. George Downing. He was afforded that title when he got back and switched allegiance to the crown and to the king. And his family were baronets ever since. But it would be a bit of a journey for him to get there. And it involved so much backstabbing and political maneuvering that the name George Downing became a slur that you would use, especially in New England, for someone who you couldn't trust. Right. So he was Anglo-Irish. He was born in Dublin, and his father was a barrister of the Inner Temple, and his family were staunchly Puritan. So they were a little bit worried about the development here in London and the lack of proper Christian values, and that's why they actually moved to Salem. And he was one of the first graduates to graduate from Harvard University. So instead of studying in Cambridge, where his parents were a little bit concerned about the raucous behavior for the students in Cambridge, they actually moved to America. He got to study in Harvard. He had a brief stint as a preacher, as a seaman preacher, until he came back to this country being a regiment preacher for John O'Keefe's regiment. And that was where he abandoned his clerical career and decided on a more military and political career, which would end up seeing him having these buildings here in Downing Street, but we're getting to that. So we're now slightly closer to Downing Street, and as you can see, unfortunately there's a big fence in the way, so it's not so easily accessible anymore as it used to be. If you've been here before the 80s, you could walk straight down and get up to the black door of number 10 and 11, where by tradition the Prime Minister lives. But we're going back to George Downing's time, well before he's bought these buildings here. And in those days, you didn't have a Prime Minister. That position didn't exist here. The government was largely paid for and handled by the king, and then he had a parliament below him that could help him administer his kingdom. Or queendom, I suppose, when you occasionally had a queen. Now, he was a very ardent supporter of Cromwell and helped topple down Charles I and his kingdom, essentially. He was one of the leading, he was called a scoutmaster in Cromwell's army. So he was one of the leading spies and information gatherers for Cromwell's army that could help set up the pieces on the board to take down the king. He was also one of the most vocal people saying that Cromwell should take up a royal title and should become the king, the new king himself, in effect. But Cromwell refused to do that, continued calling himself the Lord Protector of the realm. In 1958, when Cromwell dies and his son Richard Cromwell tries to take over, the winds are shifting and public sentiment starts to turn against the Puritans. And Cromwell's son couldn't really keep this new republic together. Now, George knew where the wind was blowing, so he was starting to think, maybe it's time to switch sides. And so he did. He could see that public sentiment was leading towards getting Charles II back to this country here, and already prepared himself to get a royal pardon. So when Charles II arrives back here, he sends him secret letters to show that really this whole parliamentarian business, that was all one big mistake. And he never intended it. He had gotten some of the wrong ideas implanted in him back in Harvard University. So he actually blamed his education amongst Puritans in America for, well, I suppose you today would call it indoctrinating him, right? And realized, oh, but now I've come to my senses. Now I want to serve you, King. That's largely how he framed it. And it worked. The king actually set him up and gave him a nice cushy position and a nice title as well, especially after he sold out his comrades and offered them on a silver platter to the king. Those among them being John O'Kay, who had first been, well, his supervisor essentially, and a sponsor for him, who he was more than happy to stab in the back to gain a royal pardon from the king. And so he did. And not only did he become a baronet, he was also offered residences right around here. The buildings that border up to St. James's Park on the other side. We might actually walk around so we can see the buildings from the other side. But he's actually the one who gained the ownership of the old townhouses there. The old townhouse, which you can still see here, that dark grey building, that was initially bought by him. And so that's also why the street is named after him, Downing Street. There's another Downing Street in New York that's named after him as well, because he happened to be quite important in the acquisition of New York for the British as well. Especially after his whole stint with the English Civil War and doing it, he was a main diplomat for the trading wars that the English had with the Dutch at the time. Yeah, so here we are on the other side. As you can see Downing Street here, you can actually see the buildings a bit better here. These old buildings that George Downing bought and for which the road were named after him. And we've already covered that he was very quick to switch sides and allegiances. There's actually a little comment about that from Samuel Pepys, who does call him a most perfidious rogue, interestingly enough. But he does say that he's a useful rogue, in that he was helping the king's cause, which Pepys was a supporter of as well. But still, it gave a wrong taste in the mouth when he was so willing to sacrifice his former comrades to the king's cause and switch allegiances so quickly. And maybe Samuel was just a little bit envious of this nice plot of land that he was given by the king and his knightly title, plus becoming a baronet as well. And he got his old title as teller of the exchequer. Yeah, and he got his old job back as teller of the exchequer.
Exchequer.
Excuse me.
Exchequer. All right, we'll leave it not in.
He became a teller of the exchequer. Exchequer.
Exchequer.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Became a teller of the exchequer. So he got his old position back in the treasury. He was also known as, even though he became extraordinarily wealthy but very unpopular, he was known to be a bit of a cheapskate, which meant that these buildings here were built rather cheaply. And actually they started encountering problems around Churchill's time when he eventually moved in. The quality of the buildings were crumbling and they were falling apart from it. It's also always had rat infestations and mice infestations. That's why there's usually a cat inside Downing Street. But it would spell consequences for prime ministers that would later move in. It wouldn't be until 1723 when Robert Walpole moved in. That was the first prime minister to actually move in here and start the tradition of having prime ministers, well, live there. There's another little funny detail. You see those windows up there, so a bit more recent history. Up there in those windows is where Boris Johnson was caught a couple of years ago during COVID, where he could be seen partying away with his party mates. when a journalist caught them through the windows and could film them because they hadn't bothered to close the curtains, so they were very easily seen in the act. Okay, we got a little extra bonus here. You see the statue of George III here, also known as the Mad King, who lived through the French Revolution and American independence. That would make any king mad, I'm sure. But he's actually looking down the Pall Mall. And the Pall Mall is a street that runs parallel to the Mall, to the famous Coronation Road. Now, the Pall Mall was a favorite place for both royals like him, but also people close to the royal family, like nobility and so on, to be wandering down the Pall Mall. Now, there was an increasing demand for lighting up the streets of London because crime was increasing severely in the 18th century. And they managed to make a demonstration of how they could use gaslit lamps lit up by the use of coal to light up a whole street. And the progenitor of that, the first street to be fully lit up by gaslit lamps, was actually the Pall Mall that we're going to go down. Lit up by a Frederick Windsor, later renamed to Windsor, who found himself getting a nice little jaunt into this country here. And one of the reasons that he went here to do this experiment was because he could avoid legal action from France and from people that own the patents to this invention in France. So he could launch his experiment here in England instead and get all the credit and acclaim that would come from it. So here we are, see the green plaque up there that's commemorating that this is where the retort was located in June 1807, on the 4th of June, for George III's birthday, when they decided to light up the street in a spectacular show to show what could be possible for London and for cities around the world. And before we had gas lamps, you gotta imagine that both London and most European cities would have been rather dark places after dark. Light was expensive, darkness was cheap. So if you wanted to light up a street, you'd have to have candle holders come and light up all the wicks again. You'd have to have people patrolling the streets. There was a lot of money involved, so most of the time you only had a few lights on, a few candles or a few lamps, but otherwise it would be swathed in darkness. Perfect for any criminal to operate in. But after this demonstration, it was shown that you actually could light up streets through, well, more or less machinery and not relying on people lighting up the lamps all the time. And it was such a spectacular thing for people that many people actually came here well after midnight. They would stand around here and look at those lamps just in awe and mesmerized at these lights that just kept going because it was completely new and groundbreaking for lots of people here in the city. So in that sense, the Pall Mall was actually the first street in the world to be fully lit up by gaslight, paving the way for city lights that we're so used to today.